a queen traveled across treacherous lands to personally negotiate her son, the king's release from enemy hands, putting her own safety on the line. Another, faced with her husband's weakness and alleged affairs, sailed to her homeland, raised an army with her lover, and returned to overthrow him, changing the course of her adopted nation. And one widow, after her husband was brutally murdered by a neighboring tribe, orchestrated a series of chillingly clever and deeply symbolic acts of retribution that were, in their own terrifying way, a form of high-stakes diplomacy to secure her people's future. These aren't characters from a fantasy novel. They were real medieval queens who wielded words, wit, and sheer willpower as powerful weapons on the world stage. Forget damsels in distress. These women were masters of the diplomatic game. Number 8. Isabella of France, the queen who brought down a king. Isabella, born a princess of France around 1295, was sometimes called the she-wolf of France. She became Queen of England when she married King Edward II. Their marriage was meant to be a diplomatic bond, sealing peace between England and France, two kingdoms often at odds. For many years, Isabella endured Edward's controversial reign, marked by his reliance on unpopular favorites like Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser. These favorites often alienated the English nobility and were seen as wielding undue influence over the king. The situation grew tense. Edward II's relationship with his own barons was terrible, and his campaigns in Scotland were disastrous. Isabella, a beautiful and intelligent woman, found herself increasingly isolated and disrespected at her husband's court. The lands and income normally afforded a queen were sometimes withheld or given to Edward's favorites. A key diplomatic mission became her turning point. In 1325, a dispute arose over the English territory of Gascony in France. Edward II was reluctant to go to France to pay homage to Isabella's brother, King Charles IV of France, for these lands, fearing plots against him at home. Isabella proposed that she go instead to negotiate a peace treaty. Edward agreed, seeing it as a way to avoid a difficult situation himself. This was a huge act of trust, or perhaps misjudgment, on Edward's part. Once in France, Isabella was in her element. She successfully negotiated a treaty where her young son, Prince Edward, the future Edward III, would come to France to pay homage for Gascony in his father's stead. But Isabella had other plans brewing. She refused to return to England as long as Hugh Despenser remained Edward II's favorite. In Paris, she became the center of a growing group of English exiles who opposed Edward II. Critically, she also formed a very close relationship with Roger Mortimer, an English nobleman who had escaped from the Tower of London after leading a failed rebellion against Edward II. Their relationship became a romantic one, and together they began plotting an invasion of England. Isabella used her royal connections and diplomatic skills to gather support. She secured aid from William, Count of Hainaut, in the Low Countries, by arranging a marriage contract between her son, Prince Edward, and William's daughter, Philippa. This alliance provided her with ships and a small, mercenary army. She presented herself not as a rebellious wife, but as a wronged queen seeking to rescue England from corrupt advisors and restore good governance with her son as the rightful heir apparent, free from the Despenser's influence. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer landed in England with their modest force. Many English nobles, disgusted with Edward II's rule, quickly flocked to her banner. Her diplomatic groundwork in France and the Low Countries, combined with the deep unpopularity of Edward II and the Despensers, meant their invasion faced little effective resistance. Edward II's support crumbled. He fled London, was eventually captured, and forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, Prince Edward III, in January 1327. Isabella and Mortimer effectively ruled as regents for the young king. Edward II died later that year in captivity at Berkeley Castle, under circumstances that remain debated but are widely suspected to involve murder. Isabella's diplomatic mission to France had transformed into a full-blown coup, forever changing the English monarchy. Number 7. Olga of Kyiv, the saint who avenged her husband with fire and feathers. Olga became the ruler of Kievan Rus, a vast territory in Eastern Europe, around the year 945. Her husband, Igor of Kyiv, was the Grand Prince. His reign ended abruptly and brutally when he was murdered by a tribe called the Drevlians. Igor had gone to them demanding more tribute than they had agreed upon, and they, in an act of defiance, killed him. Olga was left a widow with a young son, Sviatoslav. The Drevlians, perhaps thinking Olga would be a weak and easily manipulated ruler, or wanting to consolidate power, sent messengers to her with a proposal. She should marry their Prince Mal. This is where Olga's chilling diplomatic and strategic mind came into play. She didn't just refuse. She feigned agreement and then orchestrated a series of elaborate and terrifying acts of revenge, which also served as powerful messages to any other tribes thinking of challenging Kyiv's authority. When the first Drevlian delegation arrived by boat, Olga had them carried in their boat into her courtyard. Then she had a deep trench dug, and the Drevlians, still in their boat, were thrown in and buried alive. She reportedly watched, asking if they found the honor to their liking. She then sent a message to the Drevlians, saying she accepted their proposal but required their most distinguished men to accompany her to their prince, to show proper respect. When this second larger delegation of Drevlian nobles arrived, Olga invited them to wash themselves in a bathhouse after their journey. Once they were inside, she had the doors barred and the bathhouse set on fire, burning them all to death. Her vengeance wasn't over. Olga then announced she was going to the Drevlian capital, Izkorostan, to hold a funeral feast for her deceased husband. She invited the Drevlians to join. When the Drevlians had drunk heavily at the feast, Olga ordered her soldiers to attack and kill them. Chronicles claim 5,000 Drevlians were massacred that day. The final act of her campaign against the Drevlians was the siege of Izkorostan in 946. The city held out, and Olga, according to the primary chronicle, offered them a seemingly lenient peace. She told them she didn't want any more tribute of honey or furs, which they couldn't afford after the previous year's events. Instead, she asked for a small, symbolic gift from each house: 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows. The Drevlians, relieved at such a light demand, readily complied. Olga then instructed her soldiers to attach a piece of smoldering sulfur bound with cloth to each bird's leg. At nightfall, the birds were released. They flew back to their nests in the thatched roofs and wooden buildings of Izkorostan, setting the entire city ablaze. As the terrified inhabitants fled the burning city, Olga's soldiers captured or killed them. Some were enslaved, while others were forced to pay heavy tribute. After subduing the Drevlians, Olga established new administrative centers and reformed tribute collection, making it more systematic to prevent future rebellions. Her most famous diplomatic move on an international scale was her journey to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, around 957. There she converted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity and was baptized possibly by the Emperor Constantine VII himself, who became her godfather. This was a hugely significant event. By adopting the religion of the most powerful empire in the region, Olga forged closer ties with Byzantium, opening Kievan Rus to its rich culture, learning, and trade. She also sought to establish an independent church hierarchy in Kyiv, although this was a complex negotiation with Byzantium. Her conversion laid the groundwork for the eventual Christianization of all of Kievan Rus under her grandson Vladimir the Great. Olga's diplomacy, though sometimes terrifyingly brutal in its early stages, ultimately set her nation on a new cultural and religious path. Number 6. Jadwiga of Poland, the young queen who became king and forged a nation. Jadwiga, born in 1373 or 1374, was not originally destined for the Polish throne. She was the youngest daughter of Louis I, King of Hungary and Poland. After Louis's death in 1382, the Polish nobles, keen to end the personal union with Hungary and to have a monarch residing in Poland, faced a succession crisis. They rejected Jadwiga's older sister Maria, who was betrothed to Sigismund of Luxembourg, and instead chose young Jadwiga. There was a catch. She was crowned not as queen, but as Rex Polonia, King of Poland, in 1384, when she was only about 10 or 11 years old. This title emphasized that she was a monarch in her own right, not merely a queen consort. Almost immediately, the young King Jadwiga became a central figure in a major diplomatic and political decision that would shape Eastern European history for centuries. Poland needed a strong ally, particularly against the growing threat of the Teutonic Knights, a powerful German military order on its borders. Jadwiga had been betrothed in her childhood to William of Habsburg, an Austrian duke. This marriage would have aligned Poland with Western European powers. However, a more pressing and strategically advantageous option emerged: a union with Jogaila, the Grand Duke of Lithuania. Lithuania was at that time the last major pagan state in Europe. A marriage between Jadwiga and Jogaila offered immense possibilities. Jogaila promised to convert himself and his Lithuanian subjects to Roman Catholicism, to unite Lithuania with Poland, and to use Lithuanian forces to help Poland regain lost territories. This was an enormous diplomatic undertaking. It required Jadwiga to break her previous engagement to William of Habsburg, a decision that reportedly caused her personal distress, as she had affections for William. However, she was persuaded by Polish magnates and clergy that the union with Lithuania was in the best interest of Poland and Christendom. The negotiations were complex, involving promises, guarantees, and the careful balancing of Polish and Lithuanian interests. In 1385, the Union of Crewów was signed, outlining the terms. In 1386, Jogaila was baptized, taking the Christian name Władysław, married Jadwiga, and was crowned King of Poland alongside her. This personal union between Jadwiga and Władysław Jagiello, as Jogaila became known in Poland, laid the foundation for the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which would become one of the largest and most powerful states in Europe. Jadwiga wasn't just a figurehead in these events, despite her youth. She was known for her piety, intelligence, and dedication to her kingdom. She actively participated in political life. She led military expeditions, such as one in 1387 to reclaim Ruthenia, Halych, for Poland. She also engaged in diplomatic correspondence and negotiations. She personally met with the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights to try and resolve border disputes, though these issues would continue for many years. She was a patron of learning and religion, founding a college for Lithuanian priests in Prague, and famously donating her personal jewelry to help re-establish and fund the University of Krakow, now Jagiellonian University, which became a major center of scholarship. Her diplomatic legacy was profound. The Polish-Lithuanian Union not only created a formidable political and military bloc that could challenge the Teutonic Knights, culminating in the Battle of Grunwald after her death, but it also led to the Christianization of Lithuania, integrating it more fully into European society. Jadwiga's willingness to prioritize the needs of her kingdom and her faith over personal desires, and her active role in the complex diplomacy surrounding the union with Lithuania, cemented her place as a revered figure in Polish history. She died young in 1399, at the age of about 25 or 26, shortly after giving birth to a daughter who also died. But her diplomatic achievement in uniting Poland and Lithuania endured for over 400 years. Number 5. Melisende of Jerusalem, the Crusader queen, who ruled in her own right. Melisende, born around 1105, was the eldest daughter of King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, one of the early rulers of the Crusader kingdom, established in the Holy Land after the First Crusade. In a society dominated by warrior knights and clergy, and in a kingdom constantly under threat from surrounding Muslim powers, a woman ruling was unusual. However, Baldwin II had no sons, and he made it clear that Melisende was his heir. Before his death, he ensured her position by associating her with him in government and by arranging her marriage to Fulk V, Count of Anjou, a powerful and experienced nobleman from France. Crucially, Baldwin II stipulated that Melisende would rule jointly with Fulk and their future son. When Baldwin II died in 1131, Melisende and Fulk were crowned as Queen and King of Jerusalem. Initially, Fulk, with the support of some of his Angevin knights, tried to sideline Melisende and rule alone. He underestimated his wife. Melisende was not one to be easily pushed aside. She had the support of a significant faction of the Jerusalem nobility who were wary of Fulk's attempts to place his own followers in positions of power. The tension between husband and wife escalated to the point where it threatened the stability of the kingdom. There were even rumors that Melisende was involved in an alleged affair of a leading noble, Hugh II of Jaffa, who then rebelled against Fulk. The crisis came to a head, and a council of nobles intervened. They reaffirmed Melisende's hereditary rights to rule. From that point on, around 1135 or 1136, Fulk recognized Melisende's authority, and they ruled jointly with Melisende's name appearing on charters and coins, and her consent being required for official acts. She was not just a consort, she was a ruling queen. Her diplomatic skill was evident in her ability to rally support among the local nobility, the Poulens, Franks born in the east, who saw her as their rightful leader and a guarantor of their own positions against newcomer Angevins. After Fulk's death, in a hunting accident in 1143, Melisende became regent for their young son Baldwin III, who was only 13. She ruled effectively on her own for several years. This was a critical period for the Crusader states, the northern Crusader state of Edessa fell to Zengi, the Muslim Atabeg of Mosul and Aleppo, in 1144. This disaster prompted the call for the Second Crusade from Europe. Melisende's government had to deal with the military and political fallout of Edessa's fall and prepare for the arrival of the new Crusaders. She proved to be a capable administrator and diplomat during her regency. She maintained good relations with the church, was a patron of arts and architecture, and made important political appointments. She commissioned the famous Melisende Psalter, an illuminated manuscript which is a masterpiece of Crusader art. However, as Baldwin III came of age, he began to demand full power. Melisende was reluctant to relinquish her authority, having ruled successfully for years. This led to a political struggle between mother and son in 1152. Baldwin III accused his mother of refusing to cede power, and even took to arms, besieging her in the Tower of David in Jerusalem. The conflict was resolved through the mediation of the church and nobility. Melisende was forced to concede most of her power to Baldwin III, though she retained control of the city of Nablus and its surrounding lands. Even in this diminished role, her influence continued. Baldwin III often sought her counsel, and she remained an important figure in the kingdom. She participated in council meetings and was involved in diplomatic matters such as arranging royal marriages. For example, she played a role in negotiating Baldwin III's marriage to Theodora Komnene, a niece of the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos, an important alliance for the kingdom. Melisende's career shows a queen who successfully asserted her hereditary right to rule, navigated complex internal politics, governed during a time of crisis, and wielded considerable diplomatic influence in the precarious environment of the Crusader states. Number 4. Matilda of Tuscany, the warrior countess, who brokered peace between Pope and Emperor. Matilda of Tuscany, also known as Matilda of Canossa, born around 1046, was one of the most powerful and influential women of the High Middle Ages. She was the Countess of Tuscany, a vast and strategically important territory in northern Italy, controlling key alpine passes and roads leading to Rome. This made her a major player in the tumultuous politics of 11th century Europe, particularly in the fierce struggle between the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire known as the Investiture Controversy. This conflict was essentially about who had the ultimate authority to appoint church officials, the Pope or the Emperor. Matilda was a staunch supporter of the papal reform movement, which sought to free the church from secular control and assert papal supremacy. She was deeply devout and had close ties with several reformist popes, most notably Pope Gregory VII. Her lands became a crucial buffer zone and a base of support for the papacy against the Holy Roman Emperors, particularly Henry IV. Her most famous diplomatic achievement occurred in the winter of 1077, at her castle of Canossa. Pope Gregory VII had excommunicated Emperor Henry IV, a devastating spiritual and political blow that encouraged rebellion among Henry's German nobles. Facing a revolt and the threat of deposition, Henry IV made a desperate move. He secretly crossed the Alps in the dead of winter with his wife and a small retinue to seek the Pope's forgiveness. Pope Gregory VII was staying at Matilda's castle of Canossa at the time, as she was one of his most trusted allies and protectors. For 3 days, from January 25th to 27th, 1077, Henry IV, dressed as a penitent pilgrim in a simple woolen tunic, and barefoot despite the snow and freezing cold, stood outside the gates of Canossa, fasting and begging the Pope for absolution. This dramatic act of penance is known as the Walk to Canossa. Matilda played a critical role as a mediator in this extraordinary standoff. She, along with Abbot Hugh of Cluny, Henry's godfather, interceded with the reluctant Pope Gregory VII on Henry's behalf. It was within her castle, and with her active negotiation, that the terms for lifting the excommunication were discussed. Matilda's diplomatic skills were essential in bridging the gap between the determined Pope and the humbled emperor. Finally, Pope Gregory VII, moved by Henry's display of contrition and the entreaties of Matilda and Hugh, agreed to lift the excommunication. While the reconciliation at Canossa was temporary, the investiture controversy would continue for decades. It was a moment of immense symbolic power and a significant diplomatic victory for the papacy, demonstrating its ability to humble even the most powerful secular ruler. Matilda's role as host and mediator was central to this event. Beyond Canossa, Matilda was not just a diplomat, but also a formidable military leader. She personally led her troops in battle on numerous occasions, defending her lands and supporting the papal cause against imperial forces. She maintained a sophisticated court that was a center of culture and learning. She corresponded with popes, emperors, kings, and leading intellectuals of her time. Her ability to manage her vast territories, command armies, and navigate the treacherous political landscape of Italy, all while championing the papal cause, was remarkable. She also made significant diplomatic decisions regarding the future of her lands. Although she married twice, both marriages were politically motivated and childless. She made large donations of her lands to the papacy, which became a source of future conflict between popes and emperors who both claimed rights to her inheritance. Her diplomatic acumen was shown in her ability to maintain her independence and authority for decades, maneuvering between the two great powers of Europe. Matilda's legacy is that of a powerful female ruler who used her wealth, military strength, and considerable diplomatic skills to shape the political and religious destiny of Italy and influence the wider European stage. She defied traditional gender roles, ruling and fighting like any male lord, and her castle at Canossa became forever synonymous with a pivotal moment of medieval diplomacy. Number 3. Blanche of Castile, the foreign queen, who saved France twice. Blanche of Castile, born in 1188 in Palencia, Spain, was the daughter of King Alfonso VIII of Castile and Eleanor of England, who herself was a daughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Her grandmother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, personally selected Blanche, then around 12 years old, to marry Prince Louis the heir to the French throne. This marriage, which took place in 1200, was a diplomatic alliance intended to create peace between France and England, then ruled by Blanche's uncle, King John. Blanche became Queen of France in 1223, when her husband ascended the throne as Louis VIII. However, Louis VIII's reign was short. He died of dysentery in 1226, while returning from a military campaign against the Cathar heretics in southern France. Their son, Louis IX, later St. Louis, was only 12 years old. Louis VIII's will named Blanche as regent and guardian of their children. This was a challenging position for any ruler, let alone a foreign-born queen in a kingdom where powerful feudal lords were often rebellious and eager to exploit a royal minority. Immediately, several powerful French barons, including Peter Mauclerc, Duke of Brittany, and Hugh de Lusignan, Count of La Marche, formed a coalition to challenge Blanche's regency and reclaim powers they felt had been usurped by the crown. They saw the young king and his foreign mother as an opportunity. Blanche, however, proved to be an extraordinarily astute and determined political leader. She acted swiftly and decisively. Her diplomacy was a mix of firm negotiation, strategic alliances, and, when necessary, a show of force. One of her first diplomatic masterstrokes was to ensure her son, Louis IX, was quickly crowned at Reims. This sacred ceremony legitimized his rule and strengthened her position as regent. She then skillfully worked to break apart the baronial coalitions. She used persuasion, offering concessions to some, while isolating and confronting others. She was known for her strong will and her ability to rally loyal supporters. There are accounts of her appearing before rebellious nobles with her young son, appealing to their loyalty to the crown and their Christian duty. On one occasion, when Paris was threatened by rebellious lords, she and young Louis had to be rescued by loyal citizens, an event that likely strengthened her bond with the common people. She successfully navigated multiple baronial revolts during the early years of Louis IX's minority. For example, she dealt with the ambitions of Enguerrand III, Lord of Coucy, who was rumored to be aspiring to the throne. She also had to contend with interference from King Henry III of England, who supported some of the rebellious French nobles. Blanche managed to outmaneuver them through a combination of military preparedness and shrewd diplomacy, often playing her enemies against each other. She secured truces and treaties that maintained the integrity of the kingdom. Blanche's regency officially ended when Louis IX came of age in 1234. However, her influence remained immense. Louis IX deeply respected and trusted his mother, and she continued to be his closest advisor. Her diplomatic skills were called upon again when Louis IX embarked on the Seventh Crusade in 1248. He left Blanche as regent of France once more, even though he was a mature and experienced king. This was a testament to her proven abilities. During Louis IX's long absence, he was away until 1254, including a period of captivity in Egypt. Blanche governed France with wisdom and strength. She had to manage the kingdom's finances, which were strained by the costs of the crusade. She dealt with internal unrest, such as the Shepherd's Crusade of 1251, a popular but unruly movement that she eventually had to suppress. She also continued to conduct foreign policy, maintaining peace with neighboring rulers and ensuring the stability of France. Her letters from this period show her firm grasp of affairs and her tireless dedication. Blanche of Castile died in 1252, while Louis IX was still on crusade. Her son was devastated by the news. Her two regencies are considered remarkable successes. A Spanish princess who became a French queen, she used her intelligence, courage, and diplomatic finesse to protect the French crown, preserve the kingdom's unity, and lay the groundwork for the celebrated reign of her son, St. Louis. Number 2. Isabella I of Castile, the queen who unified Spain and funded Columbus. Isabella, the first born in 1451, became Queen of Castile and Leon in 1474. Her path to the throne was not straightforward. She was the half-sister of King Henry IV of Castile, whose reign was plagued by instability and questions about the legitimacy of his own daughter, Joanna la Beltraneja, as heir. Isabella had to navigate a complex web of political intrigue and rival claimants. One of her earliest and most significant diplomatic and personal acts was her marriage to Ferdinand II of Aragon in 1469. This marriage was undertaken secretly and against the wishes of her brother Henry IV, who wanted her to marry someone else. The union of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon was a dynastic alliance of immense consequence. It laid the foundation for the political unification of Spain, bringing together the two largest Christian kingdoms on the Iberian Peninsula. When Henry IV died in 1474, Isabella immediately proclaimed herself Queen of Castile. This sparked a war of succession, as Joanna la Beltraneja, supported by her husband King Afonso V of Portugal, also claimed the Castilian throne. Isabella and Ferdinand fought together to secure her claim. Isabella was actively involved, not just in strategy and diplomacy, but also in rallying support and even appearing near battlefields to inspire her troops. The war ended in 1479 with Isabella's victory, solidified by the Treaty of Alcacovas with Portugal. In the same year, Ferdinand became King of Aragon, and the two monarchs began their joint rule, famously known as the Reign of the Catholic Monarchs. Their joint rule was a masterpiece of coordinated diplomacy and governance, though Castile and Aragon remained legally distinct kingdoms with their own laws and institutions. They worked to centralize power, reform the administration, and reduce the influence of the powerful nobility. A major diplomatic and military focus of their reign was the completion of the Reconquista, the centuries-long effort by Christian kingdoms to reclaim Iberian territories ruled by Muslims. The last remaining Muslim emirate on the peninsula was Granada. Isabella and Ferdinand launched a systematic, decade-long campaign against Granada. This involved not only military sieges, but also complex diplomacy, negotiating with different factions within Granada, encouraging defections, and managing the logistics of a long war. Isabella was personally involved in organizing supplies and medical care for the troops. In January 1492, Granada finally surrendered. The terms of surrender, negotiated with Sultan Muhammad XII, Boabdil, initially promised religious freedom to the Muslim population, though these promises were later eroded. The year 1492 was pivotal for Isabella for another reason. After years of petitioning and several rejections, an Italian mariner named Christopher Columbus finally convinced Isabella to fund his voyage to find a western sea route to the East Indies. Ferdinand was reportedly more skeptical, but Isabella, perhaps seeing the potential for new trade routes, wealth, and the spread of Christianity, agreed to support the expedition. The capitulations of Santa Fe, signed in April 1492, outlined the terms of the agreement between Columbus and the monarchs. Columbus's subsequent landing in the Americas later that year opened up vast new territories for European exploration and colonization. Profoundly changing world history, Isabella's decision to back Columbus was a gamble that had enormous, unforeseen diplomatic and jolty consequences. Isabella and Ferdinand also used diplomacy extensively in their foreign policy, particularly through strategic marriages for their children. Their aim was to isolate their main rival, France, and build a network of alliances. Their daughter Joanna, known as Joanna the Mad, married Philip the Handsome, son of the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, linking Spain with the powerful Habsburg dynasty. Their daughter, Catherine of Aragon, was married first to Arthur, Prince of Wales, and then to his younger brother, King Henry VIII of England, forging an alliance with England. Other children were married into the Portuguese royal family. These dynastic marriages were complex diplomatic negotiations designed to secure Spain's position in Europe. Isabella was a deeply religious queen, and her policies, including the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition in 1478 and the Edict of Expulsion of Jews in 1492, were driven by her desire for religious uniformity in her kingdoms. These actions also had profound social and economic consequences, and their diplomatic ramifications included strained relations with some powers, like the Ottoman Empire, which welcomed expelled Jews. Isabella's reign was marked by bold diplomatic initiatives that reshaped Spain and had a lasting impact on the world. Number 1. Eleanor of Aquitaine, the queen who ruled 2 kingdoms and defied emperors. Eleanor of Aquitaine, born around 1122 or 1124, was one of the most remarkable and powerful women of the Middle Ages. She inherited the vast Duchy of Aquitaine in southwestern France at a young age, making her the most eligible heiress in Europe. Her territories were larger and wealthier than those directly controlled by the King of France. Her first marriage, in 1137, was to Prince Louis, who became King Louis VII of France just weeks later. As Queen of France, Eleanor was not content to be a mere figurehead. She was known for her intelligence, vivacity, and strong will. A significant early display of her involvement in state affairs was her participation in the Second Crusade, 1147 to 1149. It was highly unusual for a queen to accompany her husband on such a dangerous military expedition to the Holy Land. Eleanor, along with her own Aquitanian vassals and ladies-in-waiting, joined the crusade. Her presence caused much comment and some controversy. During the crusade, tensions between Eleanor and Louis VII grew. There were disagreements over military strategy, particularly during the difficult march across Anatolia. In Antioch, ruled by her uncle Raymond of Poitiers, rumors circulated about Eleanor's close relationship with Raymond, and she even suggested that the crusade should focus on helping Antioch rather than marching directly to Jerusalem. She also reportedly raised the issue of their consanguinity, being too closely related by blood to be married according to church law, suggesting she wanted an annulment. The crusade was largely a failure, and the marriage between Eleanor and Louis, which had produced 2 daughters but no sons, deteriorated further. In 1152, their marriage was annulled on the grounds of consanguinity. This was a major diplomatic event in itself. Just 8 weeks later, Eleanor made a stunning move. She married Henry, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, who was 11 years her junior and a rival to her former husband, the King of France. This marriage was a political masterstroke for Henry and a potential disaster for Louis VII. Eleanor's vast lands of Aquitaine were now combined with Henry's territories in Normandy, Anjou, Maine, and Touraine. 2 years later, in 1154, Henry became King Henry II of England. Eleanor was now Queen of England, while still Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right. Their combined territories, often called the Angevin Empire, stretched from the borders of Scotland to the Pyrenees, dwarfing the lands directly ruled by the French king. Eleanor played an active role in governing this vast and diverse collection of lands. She often acted as regent in England when Henry II was on the continent, and she spent considerable time administering Aquitaine, where she was the acknowledged duchess. She was a patron of arts and culture, and her court, particularly in Poitiers, was renowned as a center of chivalry and troubadour poetry. However, her relationship with Henry II also became strained over time, partly due to his numerous infidelities, most famously with Rosamund Clifford, and his attempts to control her lands and sideline her politically. In 1173, Eleanor took a dramatic step. She supported her elder sons, Henry the Young King, Richard, later Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey, in a major revolt against their father, Henry II. It's believed Eleanor encouraged their rebellion, perhaps seeking more power for her sons and for herself in Aquitaine. The revolt failed, and Henry II imprisoned Eleanor. She remained in captivity, mostly in England, for about 16 years, though the conditions of her confinement varied. Her political career, however, was far from over. When Henry II died in 1189, her favorite son, Richard I, the Lionheart, became king and immediately released her. Despite being in her late 60s, Eleanor re-emerged as a powerful political force. While Richard was away on the Third Crusade, 1190 to 1192, and then during his subsequent captivity in Germany, 1192 to 1194, Eleanor effectively governed England as Regency Council. She worked tirelessly to maintain stability, raise the enormous ransom demanded for Richard's release by Emperor Henry VI, and thwart the plots of her youngest son John, who tried to usurp the throne. Eleanor personally traveled to Germany in the harsh winter of 1194, bringing part of the ransom money to negotiate and secure Richard's release. She was then in her early 70s. After Richard's return, she continued to be an influential advisor. When Richard died in 1199, Eleanor supported the claim of her son John to the English throne and the Angevin lands against the rival claim of her grandson Arthur of Brittany. In her late 70s, she undertook another arduous diplomatic journey, traveling from Fontevraud in France across the Pyrenees to Castile to select one of her granddaughters, Blanche, later the famous Blanche of Castile, Queen of France, to marry the French heir, Prince Louis. This was a crucial diplomatic mission aimed at securing peace with France. Eleanor of Aquitaine lived to be around 80 years old, an extraordinary lifespan for the era. She died in 1204 at Fontevraud Abbey, having been a queen of two powerful kingdoms, a duchess in her own right, a crusader, a political prisoner, a regent, and a formidable diplomat whose actions shaped the course of Western Europe for decades.